Hello, I'm Marites Vitug, and this is Worldview, where we take a look at global, regional, and national affairs in conversations with officials, newsmakers, and analysts. Bea Cupin, our senior reporter covering foreign affairs and security, will be my co-host in this episode. We also want you to be part of this conversation. As you're watching, hop onto the Security and Global Affairs channel and tell us what you think. Joining us is Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo. We will be talking about foreign policy under the presidency of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Welcome to the show, sir, and thank you very much for your time. Maybe let's start with a core aspect of Philippine foreign policy today. We notice that there's a active building of security partners and strengthening of alliances. What are the specific goals of President Marcos and his government?
Well, as you mentioned, we have been reaching out to many countries to develop, I would say, more partnerships, and not primarily only on security, unless we take security from a broad angle. That means both, for example, defense security, economic security. So it's in that sense that we are reaching out, because we feel in today's world of fast-changing events, it's important to develop or strengthen traditional partnerships and open up also relations and cooperation with non-traditional partners. So this policy is not limited to only one region, but we're expanding to other regions, of course. For example, the Europe, the EU, and even we're now even considering expanding cooperation with countries in the Pacific, as well as the importance that we're now also trying to give to enhancing cooperation with countries in Africa. So this is let's say an approach which is really global in nature.
And is this a two-way street? I mean, this is not just the Philippines reaching out, but other countries reaching out to the Philippines as well.
Well, I think we reach a time where many countries have the similar views. And in fact, many are reaching out also to the Philippines. And I even say even the EU, for example. Yeah. Recently, the EU agreed to resume free trade negotiations with the Philippines. That was a decision made on the part of the EU. So in many ways, our EU partners are also reaching out to the Philippines. This is seen by the many number of visits being made from the Europe, not only government, but even from business, and vice versa, Philippines to Europe. And even more so in our region. Countries in our region have also been reaching out to us, and we've been reaching out to them. So it seems like many countries are really seeing the importance in today's world of strengthening cooperation and partnerships, mainly because I think the changing environment, and I say environment in both political and also the natural environment. Climate change is a great unifier of positions. And here all countries have basically the same objectives in dealing with climate change.
So is this also an effort to lessen dependence on our main treaty ally, the U.S.?
I think that would be, the thing is to try and spread out cooperation with all countries and to try and ensure greater security or resilience by being in a position to adapt in case of any changes. So for example, if you have traditional partners in one way, and if anything happens, it's important that you have other alternatives to reach out. So I think it's really aimed at increasing our options in today's world. And it's important that at the same time, we benefit from this by improving our own security, both in terms of, for example, defense, but even more important, I think, for me personally, in the economic field, economic security, because that would provide also an important means of securing your basic interests, and which means, of course, ensuring greater economic prosperity and development, and at the same time strengthening your economy and your ability to react to any changes in the world.
You mentioned Europe earlier. Doesn't Europe look at us as a market for their defense equipment? I mean, beyond the free trade and economic cooperation.
Well, I think some countries in Europe view defense cooperation as important, but I would say those very same countries are also amongst our top trading and investment partners. So I think it's in all areas where I think this type of cooperation is taking place. So in other words, when we deal with the countries, so far at least, it's not been focused on, let's say, in particular, for example, only defense or only that type of security or transaction, but really a lot more on trade and investment. So in fact, the fact that the EU has agreed to resume FTA negotiations, that's basically trading in goods and services. So I think that is the approach. So it'll be overall, really, not focused on a particular sector.
Sir, perhaps to take our viewers behind the scenes of diplomacy, like how do these partnerships, cooperation, loosely coalitions of these countries who want to approach the Philippines, how does this work?
Well, I would say more partnerships, and I think it just happens that you all have a common desire or approach. Naturally, this doesn't happen overnight. There are proposals, for example, to have a partnership. But remember, these are not what I'd say like formal partnerships. These are partnerships which are based on common objectives and goals. And it happens that, as I said, we seem to live in a time where many countries seem to have the same perspective. And this means partnerships, whether they be of a bilateral partnership, trilateral partnership, or even a regional one like ASEAN. So they just seem to be happening now because I think mainly the changing geopolitical situation in many regions and recent developments, and of course whether they be man-made or natural. And I again use the example of climate change and similar priorities. For example, in the Philippines, we are aiming for increasing dependence on renewable energies, and many countries have the same. So I think these objectives are beginning to emerge in so many countries, and we see common benefits if we cooperate more, or try to cooperate more.
So, sir, you're referring to the changing geopolitical environment. I mean, are you referring to Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine, and then the aggressive behavior of China in South China Sea and the threat to Taiwan?
Well, yeah, those are examples, for example, of the changing geopolitical situation or climate here in our region. For example, in the Ukraine, you have the conflict now taking place in Ukraine, and obviously, as we all know, when Russia invaded Ukraine, in a way, it went against. Well, it definitely went against international law and the UN Charter. And you see here developments even in our own region, the growing assertiveness of China, for example, in the South China Sea, and undertaking actions which are certainly not consistent with the UNCLOS. So what you see here are developments which seem to question or the prevailing international law or the rule of law. And you get uncertain developments in other regions, for example, in the Middle East. So all of these increasing uncertainties make it important for countries to pay more attention to their security. And the best way is, you cannot do it alone, but the best way is to reach out to countries who share similar views. But this doesn't mean that we're closing to other countries. We're open to all countries. It's just we have to, I think, be more concerned now of how we can preserve our security and promote and defend our interests.
Sir, informally, Japan has proposed trilateral cooperation with India, Japan, India, and the Philippines. What are the prospects for this kind of cooperation?
Well, frankly, no one has proposed it to me yet.
So, I mean, informally.
I mean, I've heard others, but I haven't heard it from Japan or India. But as you know, in our policy today, we don't rule out anything as long as it's consistent with our national interest, and if we see benefits from such cooperation. So it could be trilateral, quadrilateral, and of course we have our ASEAN. So I think we're not ruling out anything a priori unless if it's in our interest to do so. So, but on that particular issue, we have had, at least as far as I know, we have not received any proposal or suggestion in our talks, either with Japan or India.
But India was a latecomer. I mean, India supported the Philippines' victory 6 years late, right, sir? And so what do you expect from our bilateral relations with India? I know it has improved, it's getting warmer. I mean, and the president is expected to visit New Delhi in July. Is that already?
Well, I don't think there's been a formal invitation yet to that effect, but certainly the visit, the possibility of a visit to India is always open, and vice versa. Visit of Prime Minister Modi to the Philippines is also would be welcome. I think in many ways the interests of the Philippines and our region and India have more or less been coalescing, and because of we now share similar views, and as I said, on the region and also on. And I think we finally realize it's important. We see how we can really seriously begin to enhance and increase our cooperation and relationship in both political and economic terms. So I think there's a growing realization of that. And I visited India last year, and the Indian foreign minister came here recently, and we both appear to have very similar views on many issues. But we also were most particularly, let's say, we were most particularly agreeable on the need really to increase our economic cooperation. But we did share similar, and we do share similar views on the regional security outlook, as well as the global security outlook. So I think all of this have just come into play in recent years. And so we were very happy when India also made it clear that they support Philippine sovereignty, and so I think these are important developments.
Why do you think, sir, why do you think did they come late in the support for the Philippines through your hard work?
Maybe they realized the Philippines was right after all. But I think as I said, it's a growing recognition that we share common interests, and the need that we should build on them. So it's a good development, especially from our perspective.
Sir, jumping on to naman a trilateral cooperation that's been formalized already. Has there been discussions on how to, say, future-proof the U.S., Japan, Philippines trilateral cooperation? Because there are worries. Should there be a change in administration in the U.S. if a President Trump returns to the White House?
Well, I can't speculate on that, but at least at this stage, yes, we have, as you could see from the statement, vision statement, which essentially was almost 90% concerning economic cooperation and projects. The idea, of course, it's important to ensure that some of these activities take off soon, and I think that can only be done through some form of regular meetings. I won't say institutionalizing it, but I would say that there has to be a regular meeting. And of course, this should be done at expert levels or senior official levels. And I think we are already beginning. In fact, we will be meeting on that, and it would involve not only the political agencies, but even most especially our economic departments, like Department of Trade, Energy, Natural Resources. So all of these would have to come into play. So the key is to have regular meetings, and since we already have a statement which outlines what we have to do, the key is then to begin discussions on how we can actually implement. And this will involve also the private sector. So we have to get them involved too. And that can only be done by having regular meetings. And so I think that will ensure continuity in the work in the trilateral partnership.
So even with a change in leadership, not only in the U.S., but also in the Philippines, you are confident that these momentum of our partnership with Japan and the U.S. will continue?
I'm confident because we share similar views, similar interests. And if I don't think any administration would change that, in the sense that if you read the opening, we're all committed to free and open trade, free and open navigation, commitment to democracy. So I think all of that comes into play. And these are basic interests which go beyond any particular administration, I would think. And since a lot of it is also on economic cooperation, there is a mutual benefit to that type of cooperation. So it's not something I think which would readily be affected by any change in administration. I mean, I would think, given the type of projects that we have agreed on. So I think it should be able to withstand changes, whatever they may be, simply because what was agreed on is really based on mutual interests.
Of course, China sees it the other way, that it's an anti-China partnership. So if a new president takes over and is really attuned to China's thinking, do you think this alliance, Trilateral alliance, will be affected?
Well, I don't see how it could be considered anti-China, in the simple reason that 90% of the statement is on cooperation. And it's for mutual benefit of the countries concerned, Philippines included, of course. So I don't see how that would be aimed at China. And certainly the idea, as I said in the beginning, in the opening paragraphs of the statement, it is countries who wish to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific, who are united by common values. So it's really difficult to see, at least from my perspective, where any country would feel, let's say, upset with what was said, based on the language.
Sir, just if we can go to the West Philippine Sea, I mean not literally, but
Or we could, if we want
Unless you
to.
have a boat in the bay.
Sir, since more than a year ago, we started the Transparency Initiative. How do you assess this effort of the government to make things transparent in the West Philippine Sea? Is there a need to calibrate? What are the pros and cons of this tactic?
Well, I think the transparency has been very effective, at least in one way, from my work here at DFA. It's made the rest of the world aware of the situation in the West Philippine Sea. And as you know, ever since we did this approach of greater transparency, every time there had been an incident, or there has been an incident, many countries have come to our support. And I think this may not have been possible, or to that extent, without this kind of transparency, because they've been very aware of this. And I think they see the logic and consistency of our position, and they see that our position is consistent with international law. And so I think that has helped the transparency.
But the other side, sir, is that it has not changed China's behavior.
Well, they're also trying to take the airwaves now. And so they are, we hope it can. I mean, we're always open to discussions with China. We're open to talks with China whenever they wish. In fact, we have ongoing talks. And so we're always ready to see how we can manage these disputes through diplomatic means and peacefully. So I think it's clear from what we've seen is that the tensions have been increased by their actions. And but nevertheless, despite that, we're still open to discussions with them to see how we can manage it. So I think our approach is still very much, logically correct and consistent with law. And the fact that we're getting support from other countries is a clear indication of that.
So just curious also about the Transparency Initiative. Kasi transparency can be very intimidating for any government, right? I'd imagine. Have there been also moments where, like, oh, we shouldn't have been so forward, perhaps, with being transparent about this incident in the West Philippine Sea?
I think we've been generally we've been satisfied with this the way it's gone, and because it's really brought to the attention to the rest of the world what's going on, not only what's going on but what's happening, and so I think that has been a big factor too in getting some political, diplomatic, and moral support from other countries.
But as you said, sir, they're very aggressive even in the airwaves. There's a lot of disinformation, propaganda, and that the DFA has to answer, all these points. What does it mean for your work, and maybe what is the intention of all this, too much information about past deals, gentlemen's agreement, understandings?
Well, it means more work for us to try to bring the truth out there. So, we have to, of course, respond if we feel there's a need to respond, and many times there is, just to correct the situation, the interpretation or the information, because we don't really have to issue anything. We had the video camera and the taking it real time, so that speaks louder than words. So. There's really no need for us to sometimes even issue a press release. It's right there. But of course we do. So when China counters that, it's difficult if you look at the video, to see. But anyway, it's their right to issue that. We will answer it back if we feel we have to, and many times we have to.
Yeah. How big a concern naman, sir, is, as you mentioned, right? Like, as you said before, US-Philippine ties are on hyperdrive, pero yung China naman, parang hyperdrive din yung disinformation, misinformation, not just from the embassy or the MOFA, pero as in talagang from whatever sources. How huge a concern is that to you?
Well, I think it's we just answered back, and we're ready to answer it back also through our own releases. See, the one thing though is that one common theme is that what we hope China realizes is that many of the actions we are taking are being taken for our own national purposes or national security, and not in the context, let's say, of a U.S.-China competition or rivalry. We're doing it for our own needs. And for example, the West Philippine Sea, I think was clear on the videos on the Yungin show. That wasn't being done in the context of the U.S.-China rivalry. It was our own interest. We're protecting our sovereign rights. So that's one, let's say, topic or argument of China which we always try and correct. This is not in the context of any U.S.-China. We have our own concerns here, and that's why we want to see how we can manage them with China on the basis of our own concerns and not in the context of a U.S.-China rivalry.
I think one thing, sir, that they've been doing recently is to bring up, past deals, past agreements, and even our special envoy to Beijing, they supposedly had an understanding with him. So, I mean, what is the purpose of all this dredging up of, secret deals or past agreements? Is that to confuse us, to distract us?
Well, it could be to distract because, it was China that mentioned the deal.
Yeah.
First mentioned these agreements. So, personally, I'm not aware of any agreement or deal. So, it's really very difficult, actually, to comment on what has been said. But as I said, this was originally raised by China. We didn't mention any. It didn't come from a Filipino source who said or official who said we have an agreement with them. So I don't know what the motives are, but certainly I'm not aware of any agreement.
Sir, talking about disinformation and misinformation, recently Malacanang flagged a deep fake audio of the president supposedly ordering the military. connected to that, di ba? Parang on top of disinformation, you have generative AI problems now apparently involved, parang nasasali na rin sa West Philippine Sea issue. Like, how is the DFA navigating this emerging threat in
Yeah, well, it's fully recognized. Even the president has mentioned that. That while AI has, of course, a number of benefits, there are also a number of serious concerns because it could be used for many purposes. And actually, we are therefore we're participating in international discussions on how to deal with AI, including the UN. Kasi it's not only hindi lang naman Philippines ang affected nito. I think this is a global issue.
For sure.
And we have to see how we can manage or handle AI in a way that, of course, in a positive way and not in a negative. So certainly we are part of a number of countries, or many countries, who wish to discuss AI and see how we can have better control over its use. Because it is worrying. You'll never know issue like that. That's a clear case.
Yeah.
Sir, on ASEAN naman, our relations with ASEAN, I don't think we have a robust support from ASEAN when it comes to South China Sea issues because there are claimant countries also among ASEAN. What kind of support do you expect from ASEAN, and how can we get more robust support from them?
Well, of course, you have to understand ASEAN. But let me just say, as far as I know, in almost every major ASEAN meeting, ministerial or especially summit, there's always been language on the South China Sea. And it's been generally concerned with incidents, and it's supportive of UNCLOS and international law. I think at the moment that's where ASEAN will go, because you have to realize, I'm not defending necessarily the position. We would certainly like stronger language, but there are 10 members of ASEAN. I think 3 of them are landlocked, so they don't have any.
Yeah.
Others are not claimants. So it's natural that they would look at the situation maybe differently. Of course, there are also 4 claimants, and so we have to try and come up with language or actions which are acceptable to all, because ASEAN adopts decisions by consensus. But there have been efforts. For example, there were the joint ASEAN patrols, which were initiated, and eventually, though we are not giving up on this, of course, it's really up to us and those most immediately affected to keep on raising these issues within ASEAN. And we are taking that track, especially the commitment to international law, especially the law of the sea. And I think as long as ASEAN recognizes that, I think that's also an important factor to take into account. And that's the kind of support we would need, the political support to deal with this, especially support for international law. And I think ASEAN can give that. Of course, there are constraints within the ASEAN, as I mentioned. So I think we have to deal with ASEAN on that basis.
Some analysts say that the Philippines is an outlier in ASEAN. We're the noisiest. We're transparent about our activities in the West Philippine Sea, and we always announce our intentions in the West Philippine Sea. While Malaysia is quiet, Indonesia is not a claimant, but they're quiet, and Vietnam is also quiet. So, is this a source of tension? And of course, with the treaty ally of the U.S.
Well, the Philippines is a democracy. We have free speech. We have openness. So naturally, that's how we react. Now, I'm not commenting how other countries deal with the situation. They do it in their own way. So I think it's just the way we are, and that's the way we will deal with some issues. So I think that I don't think we're an outlier in that. In fact, we are practicing those practices of ours, which we feel are consistent with our interests. And being a democracy, being an open society, then I think it's important that we utilize, greater transparency on many issues. And we'll continue that way. But we respect whatever approach the other ASEAN countries make.
So, Sir, can we go to your years of leadership of the DFA? So,
And your entire career in the
Pretty much
DFA. Sir, but how would you describe how diplomacy has changed, through the years, under the Marcos administration included?
Well, it's become more transparent.
And is that necessarily a good thing?
Well, if you manage it correctly,
I see.
like we have, and no, I think diplomacy is basically the same. It's the world which has changed, developments. So you have to deal with these changes in the geopolitical changes. But diplomacy basically has not changed the approaches, but we're now dealing with different issues. Of course, interests remain the same, but you have these developments which you have to deal with, and you have to adapt by undertaking your own actions, which will be different. So I would say, for example, our increasing number of partnerships is one action maybe, which 10 years ago may not have been the case. So I think the basic diplomatic tools are the same, but the situation, the geopolitical situation, or even economic situation is changing or has changed. So we have to adapt and react and influence if we can.
Sir, how you've worked under two presidents, right? You were acting foreign secretary.
Yes.
Yeah, and then now you're the real foreign secretary. I mean, is President Marcos a type of leader who consults? What is the difference between him and the past leader?
Well, I was only acting secretary for 2 months under President Duterte, so I really hard to comment on that. But well, President Marcos is quite interested in foreign affairs. He has a good feel for that. So many times he's quite active and thinks a lot about foreign policy or foreign affairs, and that's important. Since he is the architect of foreign policy, but he has an personal interest in foreign affairs. So that makes our job a little bit easier to communicate and to talk with him on certain issues, which he does.
Yes. So I think, Bea, you wanted to ask about how, because Bea covers the DFA all the time, how
The communication system.
and how they manage with all the new partnerships.
Actually, sir, kasi there are concerns over managing all these ties, right? Because at least sa security defense side pa lang, you have France wanting a VFA agreement, Japan wants an RAA. Like, how do you make sure that we have the capacity to absorb all that these partners have to offer?
Well, at the moment we only have two, and Japan and France still
Long way to go.
But many of these in these visiting forces arrangements, you still have to. They're more of providing the framework cooperation. If you have any additional issues, they will still have to be discussed. So in the case of the U.S., it's different because we already have a treaty.
Yes.
So the BFA doesn't really touch that much on the MDT. That MDT already provides the basis for your defense. And with Australia, it's a little bit different from the U.S. But basically, the thing is how to increase our interoperability and address now even more so coordinate in terms of natural disasters, humanitarian assistance, and that's the general approach now. These are not to be confused with mutual defense treaties like that. So it's more like greater cooperation and partnership. But then, of course, you have to have certain requirements, and also they have to be consistent with your laws. Those are the basic.
That's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Secretary Manalo. Thank you to our viewers. Let's continue the conversation. After watching this interview, you can hop onto the Security and Global Affairs channel of the Rappler Communities app. We will see you there. This has been Worldview with Marites Vitug. Till next time.